Hey guys, this is Neil with Catalyst Machine Works, and welcome to the frame assembly video for our new Whoopmaster 4-inch. I'm really super excited to show you guys how to put this frame together. I know that you are excited to get yours together. Now I do want you to know that I'm not going to install all the electronics on camera, right? But that's okay. Don't worry. I'm going to tell you the bits and pieces of information and knowledge that you need to know to install the electronics into your frame. Now, another thing that might be giving you a bit of concern right now is that there's so many parts. Don't let that scare you, all right? The frame is not hard to assemble. And what's really nice about this particular machine is that you can assemble about 95% of the entire thing and then put your electronics in. So you basically leave the bottom plate here off, you install your electronics, and then you put the plate on. So it's really not that hard of a build. Before we get going, another thing I wanted to mention is that if you've purchased the all-weather version of this craft, there's going to be a separate video I'm producing to detail all the steps you need to know to build up the all-weather version. Okay, that's a little more complicated, and that warrants a separate video. So please wait until I've finished that video and released it to attempt to build up your all-weather Whoopmaster. I think that's very important. I'm going to have some time a little bit later this week to go ahead and finish that video. So please wait for that video. Alright, so this machine is primarily designed for the Cadix Vista. RunCam also now has an equivalent. But anyways, this little bit here, the actual VTX is manufactured by DJI regardless of who you purchase it from. So I'm going to call it the DJI Vista from henceforward. Alright, now obviously you can install a analog system into this if you like, but I think probably 90% of the people who purchase this from us are going to use this HD system. So what you need to concern yourself with is how you're going to install the press nuts that go into this top plate. Okay, there's 6 press nuts that need to be pressed into this top plate. It goes right here, here, there, and then these 2 spots, okay? And so you're either going to install them on one side of the plate or the other. And what determines the side of the plate that you're going to install those press nuts into is where you are going to mount your VTX. All right, so this unit comes with one of these, right? So it comes with this little UFL antenna, and look at that. It's really not that long. So you have to, especially if you're going to be using this little stock antenna, you have to have your VTX located in such a way that this stock antenna reaches the location that we have designed into the plate to hold your antenna. Now, another option is to forego this little bit here and use one of these. And this is a UFL to SMA adapter, and then you can then use an SMA type of antenna. All right? This gives you some more freedom and some more option because you can use different length of adapters to place your antenna in different locations, sort of regardless of where this is located. All right, so let's get into it. If you're going to be using one of these, what you need to do, let me show you how this is installed. So this is the bottom plate here. Okay, you've got this little piece here. This installs into the bottom plate, and you're going to have some screws. I'll show this to you later how it screws in, but you can just imagine that it screws into this bottom plate like this. So imagine that this bottom plate is sitting here. Your Vista is then screwed down to this plate. Now, the top plate, let's rotate this like this. The top plate is going to be sitting on top like this. Okay, so you've got to figure out, well, where is my antenna attachment located in reference to the 2 holes that were designed for the antenna to be mounted. Okay, so there's 2 options. You can either mount it here or here. Let's say that I wanted to have the antennas mounted on this side. So what I'm going to do is orient my Vista such that this little UFL attachment location is closest to these holes. All right, so you can see it's going to attach here. This is going to rotate up, and then I'm going to screw this into these holes. Same thing with this, and this is where you really need to pay attention because this is only so long. All right, this is going to attach here, rotate up, and come in like this. So you could imagine if this guy was rotated, well, now you've got to try and get this to reach over here. You can only have it coming out this way because of the way that this thing attaches in. You can't go like this. It can't come in like this. So that would mean if you wanted your Vista to be oriented this way for whatever reason, that instead of having the top plate oriented like this, it would need to be flipped over. And because of that, because of the need to flip this over, that means that the little press nuts that go into these holes will be on the opposite side of this plate. Those press nuts are designed to hold the camera mount. So the camera mount attaches into and screws into those holes, into those threaded press nuts. Okay, so you need to really sit here and plan this out. Which side do you want this top plate to be rotated to, like this or like this, and that determines the side that your press nuts are going to go into. So, to give you for instance, let's say, and this is what I suggest here if you're going to run the stock antenna on the Vista, it's going to be oriented like this. Okay, this is going to be coming out like this and going up. So that means that our little antenna holder that comes with the kit is going to come through here like this. Okay, it's going to be holding the antenna in here like this. You're going to use a zip tie. I'll show you that later. We're just doing setup and planning right now. Okay, so it's going to be coming out like this. The panel mount XD60 is going to be on this side, which means, let me get one of them out here, that these press nuts are going to be on the underside, right? You're going to press them to the underside because the camera mount attaches to the top. Okay, obviously it would be reversed. If this were on, we flipped it, this was flipped, okay, and this were coming out over here, now this is going to be on the other side. There are even more options to install your antenna and your Vista into this machine. At this company, we're not about one way to do it. We like to give you guys options because everybody, we have found out in the FPV industry, likes to do things different. Everybody has a different way of doing things, so we want to make available to you as many options as possible. It's not to try and confuse everyone and make things overly complex. It's because the nature of giving people options is complexity is a reality of that. So you can't have it both ways. There you go. Okay, so now the other options. There are two other options or two other mounting locations rather for your Vista if you want to choose those. You see these little slots right here? These 4 slots? You can mount your Vista there if you like, so you can mount them to the top plate. Now, of course, if you're going to do that, you need to take into consideration how long your extension for your antenna is. If you have one of these, well, it's really not that difficult. You have the ability to run the UFL, since you have more length here with this adapter, you can run it over here. You have plenty of length to run to the Vista unit, or you could do it like this. There's plenty of length to run to the Vista if it's mounted right here. But if you're using this stock antenna, it's not going to work out for you. You're going to have to mount it to the center. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We've planned it out, and I've decided that I'm going to build this machine up such that the top plate is oriented like this, the antennas are going to be on this side, and the panel mount XD60 is going to be on this side. All right, so that means that my captive nuts are going to be on the underside. Right, so to install them, I'm going to flip it over and install all the press nuts in. Now there's 4 press nuts that go here. What I want you to do is take and just lightly sort of, we'll do one at a time. We're going to push it in like this, and then we're going to tap it with a hammer, and then I'm going to show you how to install it the rest of the way using these, one of these, and a nut. Now what you need to know in addition to this is there's 2 more press nuts that can be installed into these locations right here. This is optional. The reason that you would want to install these here is if you're going to put in 2 of these camera mounts. Okay, that would mean 1 in the front, goes like this, 1 in the front, and then 1 in the rear. All right. Now, there's another type of camera mount that I just now finished up design on and started offering on the website, and it looks like this. This guy attaches to the very rear of the machine like this, and it puts the camera farther back on the machine such that you can get greater inclination on that rear camera without getting the rear prop guards in the shot. If you're going to be using one of these, you don't need to install those 2 press nuts into those 2 holes. All right, so just for completeness, I'm going to go ahead and install all 6 press nuts. So I'll show you how to do that now. All right, so I'm going to take and just sort of tap this. Go on to the next one. You're not trying to tap it all the way into the carbon. All right, just get it snug. Make sure that you're tapping it in pretty flat. That's what she said. Sorry, I had to. Oh, I need to let you guys know that I am a 46-year-old man-child. So some of my stupid jokes, I apologize. I can't help it. Tap that in. Oh, goodness. Those popped out. All right. So now we're going to go back later. We're going to go back now and use this screw and washer to go ahead and seat the captive nut fully into the carbon. Okay, so we've got all of the press nuts installed properly. Looking good. All right, I've pulled out all the fasteners that we need. Here are the M3 by 10 millimeter aluminum black screws, and then we've got these M3 steel nylock nuts. All right, the way that this thing works is the arms are going to be attached to the top plate, and then we use this this little mid plate that goes on here. Now, this plate is not symmetric, right? It's symmetric about center line in this direction, but in this direction it is not symmetric. You can see that, move this out of the way, you can see that this bar here is sitting farther down than this one. The one that has the bar sitting farther down needs to be oriented towards the rear of the craft. The reason that it's done this way, the reason I designed it this way, is because, as you know, ESCs, most ESCs, have the main pigtail solder pads oriented this way. So we needed some more room here. That's why this bar moved. If you do it like this, well, you can install it like this, but when you try and go and put your ESC in there, you may have interference problems. All right, so orient it like this. Another thing you need to know, and this is very important, this is not symmetric, this arm is not symmetric about this line. It's asymmetric. This pad is actually veering off in one direction. And when you hold it up, you're going to be able to see it. You're going to be able to see which side this pad is sort of cocked to. That's what she said. This goes on here like this, and then you need to make sure that the pad that is rotated, that is sort of angled in this direction, is angled towards center line, right? So look at it, figure out which side it's angled to, and in this case it needs to go on this side, right? So they're angled down like this. These, it needs to be the opposite, right? So this is going to be mounted here, and so the pad needs to be angled up. This one goes here. Let's see, which side is it now? Okay. So this is going to be mounted like this. Okay. So on the two rear, the two pads are angled this direction. On the front, the two pads are angled down. And you're going to find out if you've got the pads oriented in the wrong direction and you put this on here, when you go and try and assemble the other parts of the frame, it'll become apparent real quickly that you just need to take this arm out and flip it. All right, so let's go ahead and finish up this assembly. So what we're going to do, take this, rotate it like this. Alright guys, I've gone ahead and off camera installed all four of the arms onto the top plate, and also the mid plate is installed. Now I want you to leave these a little bit loose, so tighten down the fastener sets to where they're snug, but you can still move around the arms. So that way when you go and install the prop guards and all the other bits and pieces, you have some freedom of movement to kind of get all the fasteners in and set. And then once you're done, you can go back and tighten these down nice and tight. Alright, so let's go ahead and go on to the next step. Your next step is to install the standoffs. So there's going to be 8 of them. And they are 25 millimeter tall. Right. Then we need 8 of the M3 by 6 millimeter black aluminum screws. Okay, and then just start installing the standoffs. Obviously you're going to flip your top plate over and the standoffs are coming towards you. Okay, and I'll show you on camera the locations that they go. Okay, so these two holes here, they're going to go this hole, and then on the opposite side, and then in the very back. Alright, I've got all the standoffs installed. Okay, now you're not going to be able to get them fully tightened down, but just get them nice and snug so they're sitting in location. And then on the final assembly, you'll be able to go back and tighten everything down nice and tight. Now the next step you want to go ahead and do is to install the camera mount. Since you've got access to these standoffs, the kit is going to come with these two little mounts here. This is intended for a micro camera, so 19 millimeters in width. Alright, if you purchased the 3D parts kit, or if you purchase this part separately, we have a camera mount for a standard DJI camera. Let me get it here. This is what it looks like. Okay, it looks like this. Alright, and when I say standard DJI camera, what I mean is this camera. All right, so if you've got this camera, you really should be using these. However, if for whatever reason you don't have these and you have this camera, you probably can make these work. All right, there's just going to be, they're going to be compressing a little bit on this camera and sort of wanting to move out, but I believe you can make it work. Okay, so but since I have this type camera, I'm going to use these. And now keep in mind that this set is a right and a left. You can look and see that the way that these little slots are oriented is different, right? So one goes on one side, one goes on the other side. You're going to want to figure out which side they go on. So if I had put this on the left side and I try and put my camera in, well, now my camera is going to be pointing down. So this obviously goes to the right side. This one, well, look at that. Since my camera is going to be pointing up, this particular mount is going to be mounted to this side. All right, so I'm going to mount it in and just stick them in there temporarily. You don't have to get them exactly where they're going to be when you're done. But we're just going to put them in like this, and that's fine for now. All right, so we'll move on to the next step. The next step is to install these carbon fiber pieces here. We've got two of these on your bill of material. These are called the side joints. We have this one here. This is the rear joint, and this is the front joint. These are 4mm thick carbon. You'll notice that the front and the rear joint look really similar. The way you can tell them apart is the rear joint has this little bump right here. Okay? And so the way that these install is right here. The front goes like this. The rear goes like this. And the side joints go like this. Now, on your completed assembly, the top plate is going to be mounted up here. But we're wanting to leave the top plate off. So temporarily, we're just going to run the screws down and hold these pieces in place, because having these pieces in place is going to facilitate putting in the prop guards. Okay? And then once we get all the electronics installed and it's time to go ahead and put the bottom plate on, we can then just remove the screws and put the bottom plate on, and you're good to go. So let's go ahead and install them. You want to use these. These are M3 by 10mm black aluminum screws. We'll begin, and then I'm going to do the rest off camera. All right, through the magic of video editing, poof, I've got the joints installed. We're ready to move on to the next step. Now, the next step is to put on these. These are called the motor shrouds. And then we're putting on these prop guards. I can't remember what I called these on the bill of material, but this is what they look like. There is captive nuts installed on either side, and there's an opening right here. This is by design. You're not supposed to have a captive nut installed right there. Okay, we're going to use some M2 lock nuts, or nylock nuts, and these are M2 by 20mm screws. Now, some of you may get an Allen, a head that's intended to be used with an Allen driver, and some of you may get a head that is intended to be used with Phillips head. The reason it changes is because of supply chain issues, and it just depends on what we can get. Sometimes we have trouble getting a hold of certain fasteners, and sometimes we go to look at our vendor and the fasteners we had been purchasing before are like 3 times the price. That doesn't work out. So anyways, that may change on you. I apologize for that, but we do the best that we can. So now what you want to do to install these is, first, there is a design change that I'm going to make on subsequent batches, but you'll see on this part of the motor shroud there's a little nipple, we'll call it, a little protrusion, and you want to actually cut that off. I have lost my good X-Acto knife. It's somewhere and it's freaking me out because I can't find it, and I have little kids that happen to live here at my home, and I really hope they don't find it. But anyway, so in the meantime, I'm just going to use this crappy one that I have been using for years that's very dull, but I should still be able to, boop, cut that right off. Okay, so that popped right off there. I'm going to do that to all 4 of these. Like that. I'm going to have to tell my kids, if you find an X-Acto, do not touch it and bring it to Daddy. We'll see what they do. All right, so I've got that cut off of all 4 of these. And now let's go ahead and install them. All right, so we're going to go ahead and install one of these on camera. Show you guys how it goes together. And then off camera, I'll do all 4 corners. So this goes here. Okay, I want to line that up. And then this piece goes here. Make sure that the captive nuts are facing down. And then you just run these fastener sets through. Okay, 3 locations. But what you want to do is run the screw in from this direction, right? So we'll go ahead and run these in. Line this up. Make sure your captive nuts are facing down. Okay, then we're going to come to the top side and put the little M2 nuts on. All right, let's tighten it up. Now when you tighten it up, what I want you to do is to get it just snug. Okay, so wait until you get resistance and give it a little bit more. If you go too far, you're going to notice that it's going to start to take this carbon part and sort of start bending it up. You want to stop before that happens. Just get it nice and snug. But don't overdo it. Okay. See how it started to take this and bend it, this carbon piece? That amount is fine. Yeah, you want a little bit of compression in there. But don't go too far. Don't get to where it's so tight that this really starts bending way down. Whenever you put the final assembly together, this is all going to come in and be seated properly. Okay. Feel the resistance, go a little further, and stop. All right, you see how that carbon piece is flat? Hopefully the camera's picking that up. If you go too far, it's going to start bending way up like this, and you really don't want that. All right, I stopped midstream because I want to show you guys something. You may get one of these parts. Now keep in mind this is 3D printed. You may get one of these parts where the screw doesn't easily slide in like this, right? It doesn't just drop in. On some of these holes, I find that when you print, it closes up the hole a little bit and it might grab the screw. If you try to put your screw in here and you notice that it's grabbing and it won't go, you don't have to go and sit and screw it all the way in. What you can do is just take a hammer and just lightly tap her all the way in. All right. We're back and I've got all 4 corners done now. I want to point out that when you install this set of parts right here, and if you notice that things aren't lining up, so for instance, if this is angled like this and these holes don't line up, that means that you need to take this arm and flip it over. So unfortunately, you're going to have to take these screws out. Okay, take this apart, take this off, take the arm, flip it over, and then you'll be right as rain. So it probably is a good idea before you put these nuts on and tighten everything down, just to make sure that everything lines up. You have been warned. All right. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. We're getting a lot closer now, guys. Not much more left. So we're going to put these guys on. Okay, these are the prop guards. All right, making good progress. Here we go. So let's go ahead and install one of the corners for the prop guards. Okay, for all of it, the entire machine here, all four corners, you're going to need the following. So you're going to need 4 of these oversized steel M3 washers. You're going to need 4 of these M3 nylock nuts, 4 of these aluminum sleeves. They are 4.5 millimeter in diameter and they are 4 millimeter long, M3 hole. This is M3 by 27 millimeter black aluminum screw. There's 4 of these, and there is 8 of these M3 by 16 millimeter black aluminum screw. And then we've got 16 of these little nylon black spacers. I believe these are 7 millimeter diameter and they're 6 millimeter long. Okay, so I'm going to do one corner. So with one corner, we're going to need one of these, one of these, one of those, one of these long screws, 2 of these, and 4 of these. And we'll move all these all to the side here. I'm only going to do one corner, of course, and then off camera I'll do the other 4 corners. So the way that this goes in is this location and this location use the same fastener set. Then this one here in the center uses a different fastener set. So what you want to do is take your carbon fiber part, get an M3 by 16 millimeter screw, run it in, take another carbon fiber part, run this in, I cannot explain in words how difficult it is sometimes to film this stuff on camera. Until you actually try it, you'll never know why, because it looks easy. But it is not. Okay, so then you're going to run your screw in here, like this. Okay, let's do the same thing on this opposite end. Again, you're going to use the same fasteners, one of the screws, and one of these here. Run that in. Okay, so we can go ahead and tighten those down. All right. Okay, so the next step is to put the fasteners through here. So we're going to take your long screw, run it down from the top this time. You may actually have to screw this in like this. It might get bound up in the 3D part a little bit. Okay, now take one of these black spacers and put it in here. Okay, and then go ahead and run the screw all the way through till it goes on the other side of the spacer and the little carbon fiber plate. Now take your sleeve, okay, right here, put it in between, slide it in between the 2 carbon fiber plates and line it up. Okay, and then finish running that screw even further. Keep on going. See, it's starting to come out the bottom. Okay, starting to come out the bottom there. We'll go ahead and run her all the way in. we go. All right. Okay, now the next step is to grab one of these. This is a landing foot, old TPU landing foot. Take your other spacer, insert it into this bore here, and just press it in until the top of the spacer is even with the top of the part there. So it looks like this. All right, now on this part you'll notice that there is a little cut right here. You need to line that up with this diameter, because that's where the prop kind of rotates around, so you don't want it to hit the material, so you want to line that up properly. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll put this in here like this. And the last bit is to take your washer, run him in, take the nut, put it in, let's do this with our hand to start. Okay. All right. Now we can tighten everything up. Okay, looking good. Let me make sure I've got it tightened up properly. There we go. All right. Okay, so we've got one done. And now we're going to move on to the other 4. I've installed the rest of the parts on the other 3 corners, so it's starting to look like a Whoop. Check it out. Looking good, looking good. Okay, so really the next part, the next set of steps is to install all your electronics into this bird. You can see that what I said is really the case. It's just all open and ready for you to put all your electronics in. And so once you get this part complete, and yes, it is admittedly a little bit more complicated than some frames, once it's done, it's done. And the install of the electronics goes pretty swiftly and is pretty easy. Right, so you can use that size, or if you want, we have the holes here for an all-in-one Whoop board. So some of these Whoop boards have got the ESC and the flight controller all in one, and it's 25 by 25. You can see the holes here. These are M2 holes, so you can install that kind of board if you'd like. We include in the kit some fasteners to install your stack. Now these are only for a typical micro stack like this. We've got M3 screws. If your stack takes something different like M2 screws, well, you're going to have to source those. There are so many different variations of electronics that people could install into this. I just simply can't be providing all of the different fasteners for each configuration, or the price of this thing would just keep going up. All right, so I'm giving you guys a more common type of fastener set for a more common type of stack. All right, so what you've got here are some M3 by 20 millimeter nylon screws. So you can run these in here like so. Let me go ahead and put them in for you guys. There we go. And we also include in the kit some of these little tiny white nylon standoffs that are really super handy. They're 6 millimeter long. Put those in there. Install your ESC. Okay. And this particular ESC comes with some little grommets. I'm not going to install them, but you could imagine that I have installed them. You can leave them off, or you can install them however you want to do it. All right, and we're going to put in the other set of nylon standoffs the kit includes. All right, and then let's put on our flight controller. Okay, this particular flight controller also includes some little grommets. For completeness, let's go ahead and install those. I've personally never felt it very important at all to install grommets on an ESC because it doesn't have any sensors on it. It really doesn't matter. So I usually don't. But on the flight controller, that's a different story, obviously. So we're going to put the grommets on there. It's not going to hurt if you put grommets on your ESC, of course, but it's not going to help. There we go. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and install this guy. There we go. And then we've got some little black M3 nylon nuts that we'll put on here. Again, I'm not wiring all this stuff up. There's only about 1,000 different configurations of electronics that you could use, so what would be the point of me wiring this stuff up? Because most likely your particular configuration will end up being different anyways. So we're just going to show you how this stuff actually mounts into the bird. There we go. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like when the stack is installed. Alright, now again, with your Vista, you could mount it here, or if you have the little mounting plate in the back, you could mount it in the back, or you can mount it in the center, flipped upside down like this, with the top plate. This is the way that I prefer to do it. I think that's really the best way to go. Okay, so there we have that. Now let's go ahead and show you how to install the motors. It's really simple. Obviously you're going to just install it here, and then you're going to run your wires over, cut those to length, and obviously, you know, I went a bit ahead of myself here. It's smart to put the ESC down, install your motors, cut the wires to length, solder them to the ESC, you know, wire up anything you need to wire to the ESC, and then put the flight controller on. Alright, so we kind of went out of step. That's okay. Alright, now this run here is so short that you're probably not even going to need to like use a zip tie or anything like that to hold the wires down to the arm. It's so short, it just runs right to the ESC, and you're probably good to go. Now in the kit, we include some M3 by 6 millimeter aluminum screws. You need to use these to mount your motor. Okay, so let's go ahead and mount the motor up. We'll do one of these on camera here. All right. Now, what I want to point out, between the motor and this carbon fiber plate right here is a plastic part. This plastic part is not TPU. It's harder than TPU. It's called armadillo. All right. The durometer is somewhere between TPU and ABS. All right. So it's got a little bit of flex to it, but it still has a decent amount of rigidity. It's somewhere in between those two different types of materials. So what you want to do when you run your screws in here is run them until they stop and it starts to resist, and then go a little farther. Okay? Since this is plastic, you can keep cranking on these things all the way until you take that plastic and just smush it down flat. You don't want to do that. All right? Just get it snug and then go a little farther, right? So get it snug and then go a little farther. Snug and a little farther. Okay, there you go. That's what it's going to look like there. It might be a good idea to use some blue Loctite in these areas. I'm actually going to go ahead and suggest that to you guys. Get yourself some blue Loctite and use it on these screws. After you've got them nice and snug, that way they're not going anywhere. The next topic of discussion is putting in your FPV antenna. Okay, so this type, or using an SMA adapter and then an SMA antenna. All right, I'll start with, oops, we lost some light. Okay, I'll go ahead and start with the stock antenna type that comes with these little HD systems, so like this. I've taken out these two standoffs right here on this side, so I can then install the FPV antenna mount that comes with the kit. So you install it like this, you flip it over, and you can feed it through. Okay, feed it through like this. So we've got that installed there. You can see how that works. So then what you're going to do is just feed this through here. Run this into this like this. Okay. Take a zip tie this right here. Then obviously this is going to run over to the Vista. Now, if you want to do a nice upgrade, I suggest to move over to one of these and then do an SMA antenna, because obviously you can get a lot more range with a higher end antenna. And this is pretty self-explanatory, so I'll put it in the other hole right here. That's what she said. And put these on like this. Okay. And then obviously your antenna is going to run on there like that. Okay, and then you're going to go and do your routing of this to make it to your Vista, wherever that may be mounted. All right, let's discuss the panel mount XT60 that the kit comes with. So you're going to get one of these, and then additionally inside of the kit is some little M2.5 actually screws that you can use to mount it into here, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It mounts in like this, and then you're going to wire up from your pigtail pads here over to the XT60. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and show you this final step. Once you've got all your motors installed, you've got the Vista wired up wherever you are going to mount it, whether you mount it to this or you mount it to other places, it's all wired up, ready to go. And now you're done, you're ready to go ahead and put on the bottom plate. What you're going to do is take these screws back out, and then this guy is going to mount here. Okay, but before we do that, we're going to want to go ahead and fasten this in. Now, one thing that you need to consider if you decide to mount your Vista to this is that you're going to have wiring running from the Vista over to your flight controller, right? So you want to have that wiring long enough such that you can sort of flip it up like this and then put it back down. Okay, if you've got the wiring too short, well, how are you going to screw this down to this plate? So you need to plan that out, make sure your wiring is long enough. That's one of the disadvantages of mounting your Vista to this plate. But again, there are other places to mount it, here or here. You just need to make sure that you have planned out that your UFL is long enough to reach one of these. All right, so let's go ahead and screw this down. So what we're going to do, we've got some little self-tapping screws. These are size number 2 by 1/4 inch long. All right, we've got all 4 screws in place. That plate is now mounted up. Now, this only goes one way. Okay? The distance between these 2 screw holes here and here is different. So just turn it around until it matches. And that, my friends, matches right there. So we will go ahead and now install this. Alright, we've got the bottom plate installed. Looking real good. Okay. And then once you have got everything nice and tight, it's a very, very, very structurally sound, very stiff, rigid assembly. Go back and tighten all these guys up, obviously. Make sure everything is tightened up and good to go. Very common and popular accessory that people buy. They're really useful and they look super cool. So when you install them, obviously they are providing a soft material for you to bump off of. So you're not damaging, or you're doing less damage to whatever you've hit, and you're not damaging the frame. So they're really useful. I highly suggest them. And I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to install them. So it's really, really super easy. Make sure that you notice that this is not centered, right? So you've got more material over here. And when you install it, you want to make sure that it lines up such that this plate is flat with this. And what you'll have to do is just loosen these 2 a bit. Loosen that a little bit. Run this in here. And then this part, open this up and it snaps to this little sleeve in the center. Okay. This goes like this. Run this one on the other side. Then in the kit, we include some more of these self-tapping screws. They're the same size that you used before. Number 2 by 1/4 inch. And you can line the hole up and install these. Okay. There you go. And now that's not going anywhere. You're going to want to tighten this back. Alright, now you've got the bumper installed. Really easy. Let's talk about GoPro mounts. I mean, that's what this is all about, right? Without a GoPro mount, the whole thing's kind of pointless. Okay, so the GoPro mount comes with some hardware. All right, you've got the mount itself. Then you've got some hardware. Okay, I'm getting some more hardware out of this other bag. Okay, so this particular GoPro mount is going to come with 4 of these standoffs, or these little sleeves. These are aluminum sleeves that you can press into these bores here. Like this. Excuse me, I've got my hardware mixed up, but we've got it in the other bag. So this is going to come with those 4 sleeves. We're going to have 4 of these M3 by 10 millimeter aluminum screws. We're going to have 4 of these washers here. These are aluminum washers. We're going to have an M5 screw that's 20 millimeter long, and then this is a little threaded insert. This is M5 threaded insert. What you're going to do is take and make sure that you go the right direction. You can tell which direction this is supposed to go because it's got a little chamfer right on the leading edge that goes into the part. All right, so let's match that up with the hexagon, and we're going to push that one in there. I might even take that and sort of tap it in like that. Okay, and then obviously this runs in this direction. Okay, and then you put your GoPro in here, crank down on that, and then you can unscrew this and quickly adjust the angle that you want. So this guy mounts to the bolt pattern there, and then of course you run the screws in. There you go. That's what it's going to look like when you got your mount installed. All right, looking good. So let's talk about the rear mount. Now, as I mentioned before, you can take this exact same mount, spin it around 180 degrees, and install it right here. If you wanted to do that, what you're going to do is take these 2 screws out here in the back and replace them with longer screws, okay, that can go through that and then install into the same place. This is a new development. Now that I've got this up for sale, I highly suggest this one, and that puts the camera a bit farther back. And I'm going to show you how to install it. So we'll take this out, press these in here, this. All right, so once you've got these installed like this, what you're going to go ahead and do is push this in here like this. Of course, you got to put in your sleeves like that. Okay, I'm going to use these 2. Oops. Use these 2 here. Okay, so that is what the rear mount is going to look like there, fully installed. And of course the procedure is the same. You're going to install these into the mount. Let's say that you want to use crossfire on this bird. So we sell this little mount here. This is actually the same mount that we've been selling for use on the Banggood series of frames. But what you can do is use these 2 holes here and the appropriate hardware that comes with this. It's going to come with some sleeves, screws, and then some little washers, and you can install your crossfire right here. So you can have it coming out the bottom. Works really well. I've got this installed on my personal craft, and it's pretty fantastic. Another accessory we have is this little lipo pad. These have been really popular. A lot of people like the lipo pad. I mean, it's pretty simple stuff. Sticky tape, rubberized pad, and when you install it into the top plate, this is what it's going to look like. All right, we're getting close to the end. Sorry that this video has taken so long, but there's quite a bit to talk about. So the last thing I want to discuss is props. Okay, I suggest to use a Whoop prop like this. This happens to be an HQ prop. I know Jim Fan's working on one, so that should be pretty fantastic as well. Getting the prop onto the motor can be, how do I say it, a pain in the ass. And the reason for it is pretty simple. Let me go get a normal quad and I'll show you the reason. Here is a typical quad, and as you can notice, the motor is exposed, right? So there's lots of material to grab to. That makes putting the nut on really easy because you have something that's easy to grasp and to hold, and the bell's not going to spin in your hand. But with this one, as you can see, there's a lot of material and stuff surrounding the motor. So it's harder to grab the motor, meaning it's harder to put the nut on without the sort of bell spinning in your hand. Okay, this is a brand new nut I got out of the package. And you can see, look at that. See, it's starting to want to spin that bell because I can't grab it. I can't hold on to it very well. So what are you to do? What's the workaround for this? Okay, well, what you can do is, okay, if you have an older quad and you have some nuts that are well used, take those off and use them on your craft. Or if you've only got these new nuts, what you can do is take a motor in your hand, put the nut on over and over again. Put it on, take it off. Put it on, take it off. Put it on, take it off. What that's going to do is wear in this little nylon sleeve that sits inside of the nut, and it's going to be much, much easier to get the nut onto the motor rather. So let me show you what I mean. So here is one that has some use. So this little nylon piece is sort of worn in. And there we go. Okay, and so what happens is that this nut is a lot easier to get on, so it starts to compress the prop against the knurling on the top of the bell, and then at that point I don't have to hold the motor anymore. I'm holding the prop to torque it. See how I'm holding the prop now? So I'm able to hold the prop to loosen it as well. So that's really the workaround. I can't yet think of another way to solve that. It is what it is. So if you guys want to cuss my name, feel free. You can even email me and say some choice words through email. It really doesn't affect me. I'm too old to really care if somebody's mad at me any longer. So there we go, guys. I hope that this was helpful for you. If you need any help, any additional help in addition to what we've already shown you, you can email support@catalystmachineworks.com, or you can email info@catalystmachineworks.com. All right, happy flying.